rational thinking and intellectual curiosity here on the Atheist Forum. Standing by for your questions or comments at 727-441-3000, where you can talk to a real live atheist here on Tan Talk 1340.
Crappy holidays. Ed Golly with Jim Peterson and Joe Reinhardt in the Tan Talk studio, where you can offer up your opinion on the program today. Just pick up the phone and call 441-3000. Our line's always open. This is the voice of atheism in Florida here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And what a season for us, fellas. Our AFF website, talk.aof.ngo, and you are welcome to insult an atheist for only $2. We're going to talk today about some of the remarkable stories in this book, Best Used for a Doorstop. Everybody else calls it the Bible. And the stories that are the foundation of the whole Christmas season and the holidays. I think Joe Reinhardt, as the Bible opens, its opening line tells us.
Well, yes, that of course isn't the Christmas story, it's the Old Testament, but it's everything you need to read about the Bible is revealed in the first sentence, in the beginning. In the beginning, as a literary device, means exactly the same thing as once upon a time, which is to tell us that we are being alerted that we are about to read a fairy tale. The author of the book has told us that in no uncertain terms. I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, but they certainly did it. And for those of you who are looking for truth, for absolute truth, unchangeable truth, divine inspiration, go no further than once upon a time.
But then, of course, we get into these rather curious stories about wise men following stars and virgin births and so on, and seemingly they're just accepted at face value by the Western culture without questioning, and maybe it's because those who easily subscribe to them don't really know the foundation of them and what they're really all about. And so, Jim, you and Joe are going to tell us a little about that today. Which one would you like to start with? Virgin birth?
There are so many possibilities to consider. Almost all of them implausible, but we do have to buckle down and consider what most people are talking about, or at least what they're saying when they're talking about the Christmas miracle, the Christmas event. And it begins with Joseph and Mary, newlyweds, and Mary tells Joseph that she is pregnant. Well, she got that way through a miracle of the Lord.
Or God tells Joseph that Mary is pregnant with the Christ, and he comes to him in a dream. Now, I don't know how much stock other people put in their dreams. I don't put that much in mine, and I certainly don't put any stock in other people's dreams. But if that's the best evidence they can come up with, is that Joseph had a dream that a cloud, a whirlwind, was going to descend and had descended and impregnated his young wife.
Well, it sort of parallels Mia Farrow getting knocked up in by the devil. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, isn't that kind of the same story? Just different actors?
It's just a case of it's not a crime to be gullible. It really is what it comes down
It kind of is, actually, though. I mean, as far as society and its fate is concerned, because the more gullible people are and the more that they put their stock and their lives in charge of those who will tell them stories which is of the kind which are going to relieve them of their resources and deliver them to those who are telling the stories.
And relieve them of the onus of thought.
Yes.
As well. So they do get something for their money.
Now, at least I would
be hard work.
Yeah. But I would give some credit at least to those people 2,000 years ago or more who put together their stories and who believed them, who believed in dreams because that's all they had. They didn't have any science. They didn't understand a lot of what goes on in the natural world and had no explanation for it. So therefore, if something happens in a dream, then it seems perfectly reasonable to give that the same.
Yes, but we're supposed to know better.
We are, yes, and that's what's supposed to differentiate us from our distant ancestors.
And we do have a little bit of science to work with these days. So why are we still embracing stories written by people who had no idea the Earth is a sphere? They didn't know what a star was, a germ, or a Carter's little liver pill, right? How is it that these people with no science at all got the story exactly right, and those of us now that have science are just making it all up? It's just a theory. Are you kidding me?
Divine inspiration, Ed, it goes a long way, and again, it removes us of the onus of thought. If
I'd
we're-
call it intellectual constipation, but go
Well,
ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
your
no,
thought.
Yes, you did.
I won't take issue with that, but, my point was, if I can remember now, that, people are inclined to believe, obviously, things that they've been told from day one, and have been pounded into them by every authority figure they've ever seen. And lastly, because the penalties for not believing it are extremely severe. So it's basically a carrot and a stick approach, and the stick is pretty heavy-handed.
But Joe, wouldn't it also include the imagined rewards for believing in it, which is eternal life?
Well,
An
as I said,
absolute universal absurdity, but,
No, it's a carrot and a stick.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, but that's not the punishment, that's the reward. So you've got both of them working together, right?
Exactly.
And of course, we know that the Christian mind is generally a simplistic mind that accepts and wants to be able to accept easy solutions for all life's problems. For a lot of us, it's alcohol, but for the Christian, it's the Bible, because everything is either right or wrong, black or white, good or evil. There's no in between. And so that
Well-
makes it simple to deal with life's issues.
It does, it greatly
The same way
simplifies
that they elect
things.
candidates to public office who give very simple solutions to complex problems, and they gullibly think they can provide them when they get in office.
Well, we're told that there are 3 wise men. Actually, the Bible doesn't say how many wise men there were.
Oh, really?
No, it doesn't.
Didn't know that.
And it doesn't provide us any information about how wise they were either.
No,
No.
but what we do understand is they weren't, they were following a star, but not because they were astronomers, they were astrologers.
Mhm.
It's sort of like Sybil the soothsayer, or Jean Dixon, or, pick the prophet, the historian of tomorrow of your choice, but they weren't exactly scientists. They believed in pseudoscience, and they believed in what sign you were born under, and so on and so forth, which is why they could follow a star. And I would like to offer a challenge to any of our listeners. Please, I will follow you and your star to your house anytime you like. We'll just pick a nice starry night. You show me the star right over your house, and we'll just head right over there to see how well that works. I might also point out that when people say, oh, well, this was an unusual star and it hovered on the horizon and was easy to follow, that no one else seemed to notice. Societies were very keenly interested in the movement of the heavenly spheres, and had been for thousands of years, and nobody else, apart from the astrologers in this story, noticed this amazing light in the sky. So the fact that it went by unnoticed by the world's population, with the exception of 3 people, might, again, if you were inclined to be a skeptic, make you have to question the story.
Then or now. It's interesting when you consider that one of the few scientific achievements of that age, and the ages that went before it, were in astronomy, because people had lots of time and nothing else to do, so they gave a lot of
also many of them.
yes, and well, they gave a lot of effort into mapping the sky, and the constellations that we have now, which we use as a frame of reference to detect stars, or to map them, I should say, was created then and has proven to be useful even now in a certain way. But as you say, the fact that no one else noticed is pretty extraordinary. And also the question arises, given the stars are on average about between, well, let's say 5 and 500 million light years away from Earth, any motion of the stars would be really hard to detect, let alone follow in any way. So you have to wonder what kind of a celestial object was a star that could be followed.
Isn't the galaxy only 200 million light years across?
That's all, yes.
So the naked eye can't see anything outside the galaxy, so the farthest they could be is 200 million, not 500, right?
Yeah.
I think you can
That'd be
in the
fine.
very southern hemisphere, but of course you can see Betelgeuse, but of course these people were in the Middle East above the equator, north of it, so they wouldn't have been able to see any other galaxies.
But the only
that's
apparent,
yes.
only apparent motion you could see would be caused by the rotation of the Earth.
Sure.
The
And
stars
then they
just
all
stay in the
go
same
together,
place.
right? Yeah, exactly. So unless they saw a meteorite mistaken for a star and decided to go over there.
It'd be hard to follow.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
right.
You have to have a
Poof.
fast-stepping camel.
The only other explanation would be that it was a comet of some sort.
Ah,
Well, most
comets
astronomers
were
We're
always
getting
sign.
somewhere.
Yeah, you can
signs
see
and-
those moving actually,
Yeah.
and you can track them from one day to the next as they.
It was
proceed.
thought during the Middle Ages that a comet was a sign that a person of royal lineage was either born or had died, and then.
maybe we're getting somewhere now.
And before that was considered a sign of bad luck.
Yeah.
So.
Signs and wonders.
Mhm.
Jesus says that he doesn't give signs and wonders, but there are examples of him doing just that
So-
several times.
Tom Baudet had not left the light on for these people who come to this horse stall and bunk
Stable.
up there. Yes, they were illegal immigrants, right? You know, at these days. And why were they going wherever they were going?
Well, they were going there to be taxed, which actually, no one ever had to go back to the city of their birth to be
Well,
taxed.
it was also said that they went there to participate in the census that was mandated by
The census,
the
well,
Roman
in
Empire.
order to be taxed, you had to be counted.
Of course. But the
But
thing is that
But-
most scholars, most historians of the period, going by the information available to us, can find no record of any sort of
practice
census.
of that type ever.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to talk about the shepherds for a minute while we're talking about fantasies.
He
And
said with a sheepish
You have
expression.
the floor.
as they were abiding in the fields, or as Dudley Moore says, I just can't abide people who abide in the fields, but the
Unless it's
point-
W.C. Fields, but then anyway, go ahead.
Could have been. The point is that the birth of the Savior is the single most important event in the history of the universe, probably apart from its very creation. And for that, we have the eyewitness testimony of 3 people who think that you can tell one's future or other things by what star they were born under, and a bunch of shepherds abiding in the field. In the Old Testament, there's an example in Isaiah where a king has a boil on his neck, and Isaiah causes the sundial of Ahaz to go backwards 20 minutes, to not just stand still like Jonah with the, so he could kill 50,000 more people, but actually made the sundial go backwards. I mean, and again, nobody else noticed anywhere else in the world. But he did this just to assure some pagan king that he wouldn't die from a boil on his neck. Whereas for the single most important event in the history of humankind, we have the word of a few shepherds who may or may not have too many girlfriends, and a bunch of guys who think that they can follow a star. I would think that for something as important as this, the wisdom of the Almighty, who's, again, who am I to tell him how to think, or it, or they, could have come up with some better examples,
Yes.
some better evidence.
I think
Not,
that-
not just then, but
Well, that's the
forever-
other thing
forever since.
about these so-called wise men. They brought with them gold, myrrh, and frankincense. How do they know to bring that? And how do they decide amongst them who is to bring what? You know, I mean, maybe the guy with the gold was chastised by the
Yeah.
others because he wasn't supposed to have a gift worth more than $5. But,
Well,
I
the
don't
thing
know
that
that
gets-
frankincense and myrrh were more valuable than gold, but they may have been.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why do you need to
yeah.
bring presents to a king? He's got everything already, right?
Right.
I mean, he's
He already owns the entire universe.
Exactly.
And created it.
and if this is such an important story, why did so many people in the world never hear it? The native people over here heard nothing about it. The people living from the Amazon rainforest through Alaska, all through the Pacific Rim, China, they never heard these stories. They heard
90+% of all the people who ever
Right.
lived are automatically condemned for all eternity by the Almighty in His
seems fair.
infinite mercy.
So
Yes.
this Almighty that can create universes simply by commanding it to happen can't figure out a way to communicate with all of the people in the world so that they know what He wants them to do or not do.
It's
Oh,
a
yes,
shame.
but he did, that's what all those Christian missionaries are for.
Just
You know,
unfortunate
over
that-
time, they have to go
Just
out in the world.
unfortunate the Almighty is not capable of writing coherently.
Uh-huh. Yes, we can write it up in the sky, you can just cause thoughts to appear in your brain.
It does
Lots
okay
of ways
writing
to
on the
communicate.
wall, but other than that, you ought to stay away from publishing in general.
I've never seen the handwriting on the wall.
But,
Am I confused?
but the most remarkable thing is in the stories of Genesis, that God actually comes down and talks to people.
Oh,
Isn't
he
that
does.
right? A lot of people through this.
There is a warning that
Old
you should
Testament.
carry a paddle so that when you defecate, you can bury the waste product so that the Almighty won't step in it
Step in 'em.
when He's walking around the camp at night.
Well, that seems fair.
That gives us a hint as to the fact that this God really is very similar to what Michelangelo depicted on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the wizened, white-haired, white-robed old man, commensurate with tribal leaders. The oldest were
With crud
considered
in
the
his-
wisest.
With crud in his toes.
And now we've kind of gone the opposite.
Well, he didn't have crud in his toes because he was flying up in the sky.
Yes, the oldest leaders in our society seem to be the most delusional, curiously, but
I'm getting older.
maybe
Careful.
that's evolution in progress. I don't know, but yeah, that's the other thing that puzzles me. I'd hear these songs that the choir would sing in junior high school about playing drums for this baby and bringing him silver and gold and all this stuff, and I think, well, here they are in a horse stall, and they're being brought all these riches. They could have bought the inn that night and thrown
That's right.
everybody out, right?
That's right.
I'm just so confused about it, and why does he need this money and this gold and silver?
It's
What's he
kind of-
gonna do with it?
It's
right?
kind of traditional, God has always needed.
Well,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
any
Your money.
prosperity gospel evangelist will tell you, you have to have some seed money.
Yes.
Right? You have to give God a little something to get Him off the snide so that He can then reward you, which He's been wanting and planning to do as soon as you made it possible for Him to do that by sending in the loot to the address you see on your screen.
Right.
He would be the chief example of how well God rewards the true believer.
Well, you're listening to the
Especially if you're the
Atheist
minister.
Forum here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. We're curious about some of the stories about the season. We think axial tilt and Mithra are the reasons for the season, but, or, I don't know, really, it's the greatest celebration of capitalism ever created, isn't it? Everybody's gotta go out and buy a bunch of stuff for people they may or may not even like, just because they're related to them, whether they need it or not. So this is,
The coveting season.
yes, and great for the economy. But Jim, I have some other. And I was going to say, if you'd like to join the conversation, 441-3000. We'll get you through to us, and you could tell us your favorite biblical story.
Please
What it
call and
means to you.
chastise us.
Yes.
Right. How about calling our toll-free number, 866-826-1340. 1340 is our call number on your radio
Frequency,
dial,
yes.
so it's easy to remember. 866-826-1340.
Except you only need to call that if you're out of range of the transmitter.
Well,
And
you
you're
may
listening on the
maybe
internet.
listening on the internet. We have a lot of listeners
Yes.
on the internet. And even if you're not watching us or listening to us on the radio, we still want you to send us some money.
Yeah, we'll accept all calls, we'll accept all donations, but we won't even charge you anything for calling us up to chastise us.
And we respect all denominations.
Equally.
But we,
Or we
yes,
disrespect them.
prefer 20s and 50s.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, do you have a couple of novelties about the season
We got a
that
phone
you'd
call.
like to?
Well,
Really? It's probably a wrong number, but yeah, put them on. Sorry.
Well,
Jim,
there you go.
stand by, we're gonna take the
All right.
caller here.
Go ahead.
Talk to us.
Yeah,
Hello?
this Jesus Christ, the famous hippie egomaniac alcoholic, said, "Eat this bread, drink this wine, and think about me." And both those things can get you in trouble if you. He didn't say anything about bourbon and scotch and other kinds of liquor, but I think he was up that alley. And then if you eat a lot of bread, you're going to get fat. You know what I mean? So
Good
you
point.
get drunk and fat following the message.
Maybe that's why he didn't talk about the bourbon. It's all empty calories, and that'll do it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, good
Well,
point.
they had mostly wine at the time, I think. They didn't have much in the way of
The distilled
the more
spirits.
advanced,
No,
yeah,
I don't think so.
forms of libation. That's a good point.
Anyway, caller, did you have a question for our panel or a statement that you wanted to make briefly?
Or an insult.
Or an insult or a compliment?
Yes, compliments are good. We
Go
like
ahead.
those.
Hmm.
Hello?
I guess he's run his course.
Oh,
All right.
well. Well, we appreciate the comment.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
calling, and
I
we'll
think
go-
he's, you should pardon the expression, gotten into the spirit of this whole
Yeah,
thing.
Yes, spirit, that's the thing to
Well-
remember.
Well, Jim, before you were interrupted, you were going to say something pointless. What was it?
Yes, well, let me see if I can remember what pointless thing I was going to
Okay,
point
time's
out.
up.
Well, before there was Christmas, there were all the versions of the Midwinter
Oh, yes.
Festival.
I had.
One of these,
right.
the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a god who at midwinter begins his triumphal return. It's wonderful how that can be relied upon. It always happens.
Mhm.
But it was celebrated on December 25th, and also purloined by the Roman Christians in the 4th century, around the time that, what's his name, the empire, who was the emperor who, Constantine, that's who it was, decided that Christianity was to be the new official religion. So everything worked out nicely as far as Constantine and his administration were concerned.
Well, isn't it widely agreed that if this Jesus Christ was actually born, it was later in the year, April or May or something, and because this holiday already existed, this secular holiday, that was a celebration of the end of winter and the beginning of spring, because as you pointed out, Jim, people were very conscious of the weather and the seasons, and they knew when the days were starting to get longer.
Sure.
And the sun was staying up
So that would
longer,
be
and
the
then that's
logical,
good.
and-
So they were already having this holiday, and the Christians
Right.
came in and said, well, we'll just grab that for us.
All
It's
of
in
the other myths follow the cycle of death and rebirth that we get every year in the seasons. And since there probably wasn't really a person by the name who actually was Jesus Christ, there's no reason not to debate when he was or wasn't born. It's
Right.
whatever day you want to pull out of thin air.
Yeah, yes. But, it's the,
Probably the 25th fell on a weekend that particular year. He said, well, let's just do it here, guys, you know, the 22nd, we don't have to be that close.
it is particularly important to note the effect that the winter solstice, or the axial tilt, as you put it, reached its maximum on that day, because people were profoundly influenced by it, because the food grains stored from the harvest of the previous year were beginning to run out, maybe, and days are getting darker and shorter, and people were getting pretty concerned about it. But then, magically, beginning on that date, the days started to get longer,
22nd.
and everybody was
23rd.
greatly relieved.
Yeah.
So we had to give thanks to somebody.
Maybe
And
they
whether it's
needed to
Sol
wait a
Invictus
couple
or
days just to make
Saturn.
sure it was actually starting to get longer, right?
Well, yeah, of
How
course,
do you
of
really
course.
know back then when you don't understand the big picture, right?
There's
Well, they had to stretch out the festival.
There's a book on this subject, From Ritual to Religion, that goes into how the change of seasons affected people's worshiping habits.
Yeah, that's perfectly
Regardless of
understandable
what you
human reaction to a world that is difficult to understand.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly, and so that's how it all got linked up, and we actually have fun on these holidays ourselves, even though we're atheists.
Yes, we do.
because the world kind of comes to a stop, and that's fine with us, and we spend time with friends and family and have good dinners and even fool around with the presents and stuff. So, but we are nevertheless still atheists, so we don't need to subscribe to the rituals and the prayer rituals and the church services and so on. We just get to have plain fun. And if you would like to know more about atheists or find some atheists in this area, we're going to tell you a little about an organization that is in existence here in the Tampa Bay area called the Atheists of Florida, and then we'll continue here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Atheists of Florida is a nonprofit membership organization founded in 1992. For over 25 years, Atheists of Florida has brought atheists together to address state-church separation issues, provide legal assistance in cases of religious discrimination in employment or educational institutions, help atheists meet others who want to live their lives free of religion, and produce the Atheist Forum. For membership information, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com, where you'll find our newsletters, annual reports, statement of purpose, and information about meetings and events. That's atheistofflorida.com.
441-3000 gets you through to the Atheist Forum, the most fun show here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Nobody else is in agreement with that, but we are. Joe, you have our quote for the day?
Well, yes, Ed, we were talking just a few minutes ago about the speed of light and the size of the universe. This is a question posed on that topic by Stephen Wright, which is, okay, so we know the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. The question is, what is the speed of dark?
The inverse of 186,000 miles a second.
Something along that line, yes. Thank you, Stephen Wright.
Do you know how long it takes sunlight to get from sun to earth?
8 minutes.
You're right.
That's right. 97 million miles.
A radio wave would, or I should say an electronic signal, if it was on a wire, would circle the world how many times in a second? I think it's 7. Well, it's 7 times in a second. That's how fast.
175,000 miles.
Right. Anyway, those are just the fun facts for today. How about?
Sure.
Oh, did you give us the quote?
I just did.
Oh, okay, good. Jim, you've got something you're going to
Yes,
put on the
I have,
table, which really addresses this idea that we as atheists sometimes hear that atheism is just another religion, or nobody can live free of a religion. We saw something that sort of expanded on that, which we would like to respond to. Jim?
Yes, Andrew Sullivan is a columnist for New York Magazine, and among other things, he has written the following. Everyone has a religion. It is, in fact, impossible not to have a religion, he says. If you are a human being, it's in our genes and has expressed itself in every culture. In every age, by religion, I mean something quite specific, a way of life that gives meaning, a meaning that cannot really be defended without recourse to some transcendent value, undying, quote, truth, unquote, or God, or gods. Even today's atheists, he says, are expressing an attenuated form of religion. Their denial of any God is as absolute as others' faith in God, and entails just as much a set of values to live by, including, for some, daily rituals like meditation. We are a meaning-seeking species. And so that's an interesting, if somewhat liberal point of view, but I think there's much that can be argued with. Many atheists do not, in fact, subscribe to the notion that there is anything worthy of religious attitudes.
That whole article is an insult to anyone with the most fundamental knowledge of logic. It starts out with an argument by assertion. Look, this is what I think, and therefore you ought to think the same thing I do, and the proof of it is that I think it's so. And he offers no other context, and he goes on making assertion after assertion after assertion. He could have just as well said, instead of atheists had an attenuated faith, that the atheists like to stand on their head in the rain. And the argument would have been just as valid. Mr. Sullivan doesn't know the first damn thing about atheists. He doesn't know the fact that atheist values, atheists, simply being an atheist has nothing whatsoever to do with your values. It just means that you think that the evidence on the God question is not very good. That's all that it means. This is not a value judgment at all.
Somewhere there's an atheist standing on his head in the rain. But it has nothing to do with atheism.
Or Andrew Sullivan.
More than once by believers that it actually requires more faith to be an atheist than a Christer.
Yeah.
And the argument that they give is that we can't go back and see the foundation formulation of the evolution process, so we are required therefore to take it all on faith. And they have a book that tells a story that they subscribe to, so that's perfectly acceptable evidence to them.
And,
Right.
and the argument is that atheists are just as gullible as believers. So that's really the argument. A really sweeping endorsement of religion, if there ever was one.
Sure,
It's,
but
it's only been during the past 200 years or so that sufficient evidence has accumulated about the nature of the universe and our place in it, as opposed to the complete vacuum of knowledge and understanding that existed before that. So, you know, they had nothing to put in it, so they put religion in it.
Yeah.
But as soon as we began to get some knowledge about how the universe came into being, about the Big Bang, about the nature of material, about chemistry and psychology and everything else that there is, then we've filled in all the spaces, and God became the God of the gaps.
The incredible shrinking God.
That's right.
And the thing that fascinates me about it was that, as you said, religion was the default position culturally. Everybody in the whole culture subscribed to it, right? Whether they were in England or Western Europe or the Middle East. And so for people to come forward with an understanding that really broke away from that the earth is round, that the planets go around the sun, that there are germs in water, and things that led to the whole evolutionary process, it made those people quite remarkable to think outside of the box when the norm was just to accept what everybody believed.
Not only the wisdom to do it, but the courage, because
Right.
people tend to believe in the religious proposition for two reasons. One, they sincerely believed it, and two, they sincerely did not enjoy being tortured and murdered.
But the wonderful thing is that once somebody studied something and was able to draw a reasonable, logical, and evidence-based conclusion from it, then others would come along, study it too, and agree with them, and add additional supportive
Expand on it,
evidence.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but
So that's how our world of knowledge and science came into existence.
yes, but while we were waiting for those others to join us in the safety in numbers, many of the best and brightest of our ancestors went to the stake.
Absolutely. And it's a real shame, and we must, in fact, as you say, honor them for the courage. And we still require people of courage to come out and speak the truth about things which are unpopular.
When
Truth
you
to power.
That was because of the fear of the challenge to the accepted norm, right? And we as atheists sometimes still experience that in the 21st century. That we are the most despised minority in the culture simply because we don't subscribe to these medievalist myths.
Well, I think two strong reasons, again, why belief was enforced with such draconian measures. The first is that if you read the Old Testament, and if there happened to be a blasphemer or a transgressor in their midst, sometimes God didn't discriminate in how he took care of that. He killed 50,000 Hebrews because he was mad at David for taking a census. He would swallow up whole families and would be swallowed up into the earth or cast into the lion's den or whatever. So if you had a non-believer in your midst, it could be very dangerous for the entire community.
So you don't want to get God incensed.
Yeah, but it's even worse in the New Testament because we have that problem, plus now we have the problem that if you happen to persuade one of my children to blaspheme, you could deprive them not of their life, but of their immortal life, a far serious crime, which again justifies anything to stop the horror of stealing someone's immortal soul. And to punish someone here on this planet for doing that is just a very small taste of what the Almighty, in His infinite mercy, has in store for them in the hereafter.
It's a good thing He loves us.
441-3000 will connect you to the Atheist Forum, and we're talking today about some of the curious myths and fairy tales that lead to the Christmas holidays. We actually enjoy them. We all have fun.
Sure.
On Christmas, we take the day off, take the week off, whatever. And we can swear openly without fear of retribution. but we
Atheists
don't.
like to party, that's all we do.
We like to swear anyway.
Yeah, I love profanity myself.
You're profanity. huh?
I'm pro-profanity, yes.
Didn't you have something else over there, Joe, that you wanted to bring us today? If not, I'm ready to.
I
Oh,
do.
we have lots of-
Okay.
I have some work by Thomas Aquinas, a Catholic intellectual, who for years was pointed to as being able to rationalize, to prove the existence of the deity by evidence. Which brings up an interesting question. If you have all this evidence, why do you need faith? And if faith is so effective, well, what do you need with all this evidence? So they seem to be at odds with each other. Nevertheless, Aquinas takes it upon himself to tell us what life is going to be like in heaven. Now, how he knows that, well, maybe he's just making it up as he goes along.
Oh, isn't that called inductive reasoning?
Yeah. No, I think it's called lying.
Then there.
And so, it says here that, in what form will the dead be resurrected? Augustine expected that the resurrected body will be a perfection and completion of the formerly fallen body into an ideal one suited for the purified city of God. Those who died as infants will be resurrected to their fully matured, perfect stature. I'm assuming he knows this because when he visited heaven, he found these things
Yes,
out.
of course.
Which was theirs, potentially, though not in actual bulk from birth. If the infant's potential is to be taller than Jesus Christ himself, he will be resurrected to that height. Likewise, those who died young will be raised to their prime. Those who died past their prime, on the other hand, will not be restored to their younger age. Now that just doesn't seem right to me.
No, that's
What
very
kind of heaven
disappointing.
is it when you can't get from one cloud to the next because your arthritis is killing you
For eternity.
for eternity? I mean, please.
All I wanna know is if you've lost your hair, do you get that back and in its natural color? And if what if you're a brunette who dyed her hair
Well, as a
blonde?
matter of fact, Aquinas has the answer for
Oh,
that.
that
So
might-
put your mind at ease, Ed.
Thank you.
You have
What
all
about-
the
All
answers.
you gotta do is ask.
What about hair and nails? Jesus said, "Not a hair on your head shall perish." Does this mean that all the trim parts will be restored to resurrected people? Extensions on their fingers and heads? No, Augustine says. Think of hair and nails in terms of number, not length. If a person lost hair or nails in life, the original number of hair and nails will be restored at normal length. Bald people will get all their hair back, but not all its length.
But what if they never had any hair?
Yeah, an albino, right?
Likewise, people who were obese or emaciated in life will be restored to their ideal proportions and body mass. Blemishes, scars, and other marks on the body will be removed, restoring each person to his or her ideal form. With the
idea.
exception of the wounds of martyrs, which Augustine says are not deformities but marks of honor that will add luster to their appearance and a spiritual, if not a bodily, beauty. Now, there are people who might think, Augustine was really a sick wonk.
But there's probably been, 80 to 100 billion humans that have been born ever since the beginning of the species, or what point we would mark. Where the hell are they all? Where are all these people? Where is this place called heaven? Why can't we find them? We can see so far into the universe that it's just absolutely stunning, the astronomers.
Particularly since the fairy tales in the Bible lead us to believe that you can take the stairs to heaven, or you can build a tower to heaven that you might have to knock down, or give everyone
Well, now-
strange languages.
Well, they would, believers would tell you it's a spiritual realm. And you will be restored to your bodily perfection in the spiritual realm. Now, how you resolve that apparent contradiction, I'm not clear, but it seems to be clear enough to them. So whatever that means. Do you have any idea what it means?
Yes, I do.
Tell us, please.
It means that we need to pretend to make this up as we go along.
It works for me.
Mhm.
Well, actually, it doesn't.
And again, pretending to know something that can't actually be known. There are words for that. I don't know any of them that are complimentary, with the exception of faith, which is, as we've discussed often on this show, faith is not a virtue, at least in that sense.
It's like confidence. So that if you have faith in something, then you have confidence in it. And there are people who promote confidence. I believe they're called con men, aren't they?
Confidence, man. At least.
Yes.
So
Yes.
in our culture, around the whole country, we have the celebration, we put up the lights, the trees and all this, but what percentage of humans around the world actually recognize this holiday? The whole Christmas holiday, I know they don't in China, the Middle East doesn't
Well,
in
actually,
our
they
sense,
are
but I was
beginning
gonna
to.
say the Pacific Rim countries never did, and of course, the native people in this country never did.
Well, because the Christmas holiday within Western culture has been a time for when consumption, that is the acquisition and consumption of material things, has contributed a significant amount to the overall economy. It's beginning to be highly promoted within China and Japan and other westernized economies.
It's also contributed significantly to the landfill, I believe.
Oh, yes, of course, without a doubt there. But nevertheless, that's a consequential.
I wonder what the footprint is for Christmas.
So much carbon.
And so much debt.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah, you're right. That's why I say it really has evolved into a celebration indirectly of capitalism in this country as a major boost to a lot of businesses to get them, in fact, that's the derivation of the term Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, right? It's the day that a lot of businesses actually show a profit for the year because of the shopping spree that comes in. So,
Now, of course, that could be spread out throughout the year for various and some even worthier causes. There are a couple of things, a couple of points I would like to make, if I may, about how to celebrate Christmas from an atheist perspective. One of them is keep present giving simple. Give to those who need stuff. Come to an agreement with those who don't, which is most people past their youth. There is nothing particularly virtuous in buying things that people don't need, which probably end up in a thrift shop and eventually in the landfill, as you pointed out, Ed. Yeah, you can cut out the middleman and give directly to charity. Other ways to celebrate Christmas: see friends and family when it suits you and them. Don't get too hung up on December 25th. Remember, Christmas is no big deal for atheists. Most people have several relatives they feel obliged to visit on Christmas. Make life easier for them by opting out of the competition for their presents and see them another time. If you're on your own over the holiday, just think you can eat what you like, watch what you like on television, read a book, go to bed as early or late as you like. For unbelievers, freedom is what it's all about. Relax. Try not to think about Trump. Eat, drink, and be merry, but pace yourself. You don't have to drink alcohol at breakfast time or eat plum pudding, mince pies, or that fruitcake that's been circulating for the last 17 years, or anything else at all. You don't have to cook or eat turkey or Brussels sprouts if you don't like them. Admittedly, this is harder when you're a guest, but tiny portions help.
My own personal slogan, I'd like to interject here, which is never practice moderation to excess.
Keep it all.
yeah. I was thinking today, you're talking about eat, drink, and be married. When do you think Melania is going to age out? I just kind of was thinking, I don't know why, it just struck me as a bizarre thought. I figured, she's stuck with the guy through the term or until he gets indicted. But, she's bound to age out in about another 5 years. Of course, she might outlive Trump.
I think it was Bill
in
Maher
that
pointed out that Trump kept the bubble wrap in case he has to send her back. So.
Well, let's not forget that Trump himself is aging.
Yes.
Before our eyes, I should think. He's under a lot of stress, this man is. And we saw evidence of that this past week.
Hard-earned stress.
Yes,
If that
indeed.
may be a divot
Hard.
yet, by the time this is all said and done.
Mm.
Because, he's gotta be getting under increasing amounts of stress as this all unfolds. And of course, now the Dems will be looking for his tax returns.
He'll be moving to a fantasy land of his
Yeah.
own.
It may drive him to drink once and for all. Anyway, what else, do you have anything to
Well, I have a
wrap
few
up
other
with?
points,
Okay,
yeah.
good. We've got about
Well, for
7,
instance,
8
you
minutes.
could, instead of going through this folder all, you could feed the birds. After you've eaten your Christmas dinner, whatever you might want to do, enjoy watching them eat the inevitable leftovers. Or go for a walk. Walk somewhere on Christmas or New Year's Day. Roads will be nearly empty if you time it right, and few other people will be out. Be prepared to wish the few a happy Christmas and New Year. We don't object to people wishing others a happy Christmas or New Year. It's a fine thing to do. Take pleasure in music. Not all Christmas songs or carols are religious, and music of all kinds can be very uplifting.
Yeah.
And finally, focus on enjoying yourself. Christmas can be pleasantly sociable or self-indulgent time of the year if you don't get too caught up in the competitive consumerist rush.
Well, now that Bill O'Reilly is no longer hosting his program on Fox Fake News, there seems to be no war on Christmas this year. Have you seen this surface anywhere? That was his big campaign,
Well,
wasn't
I did see where the baby Jesus was stolen out of some creche in front of some church. I forget what city it was in. But other than that, and my own personal efforts of firebombing manger scenes whenever I see them around town, I don't know of any particular war on Christmas.
But that was always the deal. Those of us who don't, fall into the traditional trappings of Christmas were considered to be hostile toward it simply because we don't fully embrace it, and instead embrace the ideas that Jim has just pointed out. That isn't a war on Christmas. That's
No.
just a different way of looking at it. We're not
Indifference
telling-
is not hostility.
Exactly.
And we do care about things that people should have an opportunity to be sociable, to express their higher order morality, take care to see to the happiness of others. This is the
Right.
only life we have, after all.
But what we do object to is when the government starts taking a stand with respect to religion. 50 years ago today, Apollo 10 launched for the moon. The 3 astronauts circled a few times and came back, and then the following launch was 11 where they landed. So on Christmas Eve, they were up there orbiting the moon, and part of the flight plan was to actually read from Genesis and transmit that back to the earth. That was sort of an establishment of a religion, wouldn't you say? Because this was totally a government project. It wasn't private at all. All taxpayers had paid for this, and here they were, using the space program to condition us to think that as Americans who should be proud of this effort that we've all helped contribute to and pay for, we should also all be Christians and believe in the religious mythology. That's very disturbing to those of us in the community of reason, and that's the kind of thing the government should never take it upon to do, to try to impose a particular religion on any of us, because we all should be free to embrace whatever religion we want or none at all. When the government does that, that's when we speak out, whether it's local, state, or federal government. And there are politicians who will do it every chance they can.
For we American atheists, freedom is truly what it's all about. That's what atheism is all about. It's the notion that you can be free of the ancient restrictions, the illogic, the ignorance, and the other things that have held back humankind from achieving the necessary degree of success in order to live in the world as we find it. So,
Right.
I think, yeah, that's one of our most important aspects of our mission.
I think it's important to understand and consider the restrictions of freedom, the idea of enlightened self-interest and the laws of satiety, among other things, the law of diminishing returns.
Can you explain that law of satiety? 'Cause some
Yeah,
people may not
sure.
understand what that is.
One milkshake is real nice. 30 of them will make you quite sick and it'd be very painful to try to drink that many. So the same thing is true with bourbon. And the law of diminishing returns tells us that, well, yes, if you have you do activity A and it feels good, if you do it 10 times, it won't feel 10 times as good. You'd be lucky if it feels twice as good, and you'd be more likely that it feels horrible.
Yes.
So
So
something-
it's important to learn those things.
Yeah, something like a Christmas tree and Christmas lights that a city might put up. We have a national Christmas tree. These are things that I think as atheists, we just think are nice to look
Yeah,
at. They're
great.
fun,
They
they're
are.
colorful.
Yeah.
But when they get to putting religious symbols of the creche, at the courthouse or the post office or in government facilities, then that's when they're overstepping their boundaries, because that becomes a government endorsement of a specific religion that a lot of us simply don't subscribe to. That's a difficult concept for Christians to understand. They think they have some kind of civil right to impose their religion on us using the government to do it. But of course, they don't.
Well, they do have the civil right to talk about their religion and to have it. We don't oppose that at all. We demand that everybody have the opportunity to have whatever religion they choose, or none at all, which we prefer, but nevertheless, the option is theirs. And the ability to express it privately in their own format is fine.
Well,
Just can't let the government do it.
they
Can't
think
take over the
they're,
government.
they think they're doing it for our benefit, of course. And I
course,
would
yes.
remind them that the inquisitors thought that torturing their victims was for the same purpose, that having them recant after a short period of physical discomfort was far better than an eternity in a lake of fire. So they were doing them a favor, just like other people bang on your doorknob or your door at 10 o'clock on
So,
Saturday
Joe,
morning.
somebody
They're there to
says,
do you a favor.
if one of our listeners says, "I'll pray for you," how do you respond?
I'll think for you.
Okay, that's Atheist Forum on the Tan Talk Radio Network, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Now, along with Joe Reinhardt and Jim Peterson, I'm Ed Golling, reminding you, if the story seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
Make them prove it.
You have been listening to the Atheist Forum. To learn more about Atheists of Florida, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com. Continue the discussion on our website, talk.aof.ngo. And join us again next Friday for another edition of the Atheist Forum here on Tan Talk 13.
I know.
It goes away.
WTAN, Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
Whoa!
WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay,
We're skating on thin
WZHR,
ice.
Zephyr Hills,
FM 104.3.
Yeah, it
Listen.
talks 15 seconds earlier, and we still didn't muck it up, somehow. Yes. You talk about Ginsburg again? Oh, where's the news? I didn't do it. I wasn't even here. Yeah, fine. Yes,
And even if I did do it,
Yes, he was.
just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty.
The devil. Thing to do.
Well, that's what
We'll talk about it.
the police in
I have that at home, Jim.
Alabama town.
I subscribe.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Blame it on Satan.
Yeah.
I haven't read it.
Yes,